While passing by the hotel maid, Millionaire froze as he recognized his childhood love. She had been presumed dead 25 years ago. Joseph Foster was a man who thrived on control. As the owner of one of the largest hotel chains in the United States, his days were dictated by precise schedules, flawless execution, and a relentless pursuit of perfection. The Foster Grand Hotel in Chicago was a crown jewel in his empire, a testament to his dedication and hard work. He knew every inch of the place, every marble tile, every chandelier that hung from the lofty ceilings. Today was no different. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting a golden hue across the polished floors. Staff members bustled around, greeting guests with well-practiced smiles, their uniforms crisp and immaculate. Joseph moved with purpose, his polished leather shoes clicking softly against the marble. His eyes were sharp, cataloging details as he walked through the hallways, noting minor imperfections others would miss. A smudge on a glass door, a flower arrangement slightly off-center. But then, it happened. The scent hit him, soft, yet unmistakable. A delicate floral perfume that seemed to linger in the air, like a whisper from the past. It was faint at first, just a hint that brushed his senses. He paused, his brow furrowing. There was something achingly familiar about it, a scent that tugged at memories buried deep within his mind. His heart gave an uncomfortable lurch. No, he thought, shaking his head slightly. It's just a coincidence. Yet the fragrance persisted, growing stronger as he walked further down the hallway. He inhaled deeply, his pulse quickening. It was more than familiar. It was personal. A name hovered on the edge of his consciousness. Just out of reach, his footsteps slowed as he scanned the corridor, searching for the source. And then he saw her. She was standing with her back to him, arranging supplies on a cleaning cart. Her uniform was simple and practical, a standard gray and white maid's outfit. But the way she held herself, the curve of her shoulders, the tilt of her head, was so painfully familiar that his breath caught in his throat. He took a hesitant step closer, his eyes narrowing, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. The woman straightened, her hands stilling for a moment before she slowly turned around. And when she did, the world tilted on its axis. Her face, her eyes, the soft curve of her lips. It was Jennifer. The air seemed to vanish from his lungs. He stared at her, his mind struggling to process the impossibility of what he was seeing. Jennifer Adams, the woman he had loved more than life itself, the woman he had mourned for a quarter of a century, stood before him. Her eyes were the same, a soft, deep brown that he used to lose himself in. Her hair, though now pulled back in a practical ponytail, still held the same auburn shimmer. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice failed him. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Jennifer," he whispered, barely audible. Her eyes widened in shock, and for a fleeting moment, a torrent of emotions flashed across her face. Recognition, fear, confusion. She took a step back, her fingers clutching the edge of the cart as if it were the only thing keeping her standing. Her lips parted as if to say something, but then she clamped them shut before he could react. She turned abruptly, her footsteps quick and unsteady as she pushed the cart away. "Wait," Joseph called, his voice louder now, echoing off the marble walls. He took a few hurried steps, his hand reaching out, but she was already moving faster. The wheels of the cart squeaked slightly as she rounded the corner. He followed, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. He had attended her funeral, grieved at her gravesite. How could she be here, alive, working in his hotel? He turned the corner just in time to see her slip through a service door marked "Staff Only." He stopped short, his chest heaving. The door swung shut with a soft click, cutting him off from the woman he had lost so long ago. For a moment, all he could hear was the pounding of his heart in his ears. He clenched his fists, his nails biting into his palms. There was no mistaking what he'd seen. That was Jennifer, his Jennifer. The scent of her perfume still lingered in the air, a cruel reminder that he wasn't dreaming. Why had she run? What had happened to her all those years ago? His mind was a storm of questions, each one more frantic than the last. With a deep breath, he straightened his shoulders, his jaw tightening. Whatever the answers were, he needed to find them. He couldn't let her slip away again. Not this time. Joseph stood frozen, his eyes locked on the staff-only door that had just closed behind Jennifer. His heart thudded painfully against his ribs, and a cold sweat prickled the back of his neck. A whirlwind of thoughts surged through his mind. Was this real? Could it truly be her? After all these years, the scent of her perfume still clung to the air, anchoring him to the reality he was struggling to comprehend. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he wiped them against the sides of his suit pants. You can't let her disappear again, he thought. Gathering his resolve, he pushed open the door and stepped into the dimly lit staff corridor. The contrast between the opulent hotel lobby and the narrow utilitarian hallway was stark. Bare walls, worn linoleum floors, and the faint hum of industrial equipment. He glanced down the corridor, his eyes scanning for any trace of her. He saw her ahead, her pace quick, almost frantic. Her figure was tense, shoulders hunched forward as if she were bracing herself against an invisible force. He called out, his voice shaking with urgency. "Jennifer, please wait." She paused for the briefest of moments, her back still to him. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath before she slowly turned around. The expression on her face was one he hadn't seen before, guarded, weary, and tinged with fear. It cut through him like a knife. "Mr. Foster," she said, her voice low and tight, her eyes avoiding his gaze. "I think you have me confused with someone else." Joseph's heart clenched. The formality of her words, the cold distance in her tone. It was as if she were building a wall right in front of him. But her eyes betrayed her. They shimmered with unshed tears, the same eyes that once sparkled with warmth and laughter. He stepped closer, his voice soft, almost pleading. "Jennifer, don't do this. I know it's you. I know that perfume. I know you." Her jaw tightened, and she shook her head, a bitter smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You don't know me," she whispered. "Not anymore." He felt his chest constrict, a wave of anguish threatening to pull him under. "You were gone, for 25 years. I thought you were dead. I grieved for you, and now you're here, alive, right in front of me. You have to tell me what happened." She closed her eyes, her hands clutching the cleaning cart so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I can't," she said, her eyes opening, filled with pain. "Please, Joseph, just let it be." Her use of his first name sent a jolt through him. It was a crack in her armor, a hint that the Jennifer he once knew was still in there somewhere. He seized on that, his determination solidifying. "I can't let it be," he said, his voice firm now. "You were everything to me, and if you're alive, if there's even the slightest chance that we can understand what happened, I need to know. I need to know the truth." Her eyes met his then, the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. For a moment, it seemed like she might give in, might let down the barriers she had so carefully constructed, but she turned away abruptly, brushing at her tears with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I can't do this." She started to walk away again, but this time Joseph moved faster. He reached out and gently took her hand. The touch was light, hesitant, as if he were afraid she might shatter. She flinched but didn't pull away immediately. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Give me a chance to understand. Just talk to me. That's all I'm asking." She took a shuddering breath, her eyes fixed on their hands. After what felt like an eternity, she nodded, barely perceptible. "Okay," she whispered. "After my shift, we can talk then." Relief flooded him, mixed with a nervous anticipation that made his fingers tremble. He let go of her hand, nodding. "I'll wait for you," he promised. She gave him one last, hesitant glance before turning away and disappearing down the corridor. He watched her go, his mind a maelstrom of hope, confusion, and dread. The woman he had thought lost forever was within his reach again, but something was terribly wrong. The Jennifer he remembered had been full of life, love, and laughter. This woman, she carried a darkness, a weight he couldn't yet understand. As he turned back toward the main lobby, the grandeur of his hotel seemed hollow, meaningless compared to the questions burning inside him. What had happened to her? Why had she stayed away, and what else was she hiding? Joseph clenched his jaw, determination hardening his features. He was going to find out. No matter what it took, he wasn't going to lose her again. Joseph spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze. The bustling energy of the Foster Grand Hotel faded into a blur as his mind cycled through fragments of memories. Unanswered questions, and the weight of Jennifer's brief promise to talk after her shift. He checked his watch for what felt like the 100th time. Each second crawled by, stretching his patience to its limit. He paced his office, his normally pristine thoughts a mess of possibilities. The woman he had mourned for 25 years was alive, but it wasn't just her presence that haunted him. It was the look in her eyes, the pain, the hesitation. What had happened to her during all those lost years? And why was she so desperate to keep her distance? The clock finally struck 6 p.m. He took a deep breath and straightened his tie, trying to gather his composure. He walked to the lobby, the soft glow of the evening lights casting long shadows on the marble floor. He glanced around, heart pounding, and spotted Jennifer by the service entrance. She was out of her uniform now, wearing a simple pair of jeans and a faded gray sweater. Her hair was pulled back, but a few loose strands framed her face, making her look both familiar and heartbreakingly different. She seemed smaller somehow, as if life had chipped away at the confident woman he once knew. She caught his gaze and hesitated for a moment before nodding slightly. He approached her, his throat dry. "Thank you for agreeing to this," he said, his voice low and sincere. She avoided his eyes. "I don't know how much good it'll do. We won't know until we try," he replied gently. "Let's go somewhere quiet." She nodded, and they walked out together. The evening air was cool, a light breeze stirring the city's energy. Joseph led her to a small cafe a few blocks away, one he remembered from years ago. It was a quiet, unassuming place, the kind where secrets could be whispered without fear of being overheard. They took a corner booth. The waitress brought 2 cups of coffee, and Joseph wrapped his hands around his mug. Seeking warmth and grounding, Jennifer stared into hers, silent. The pause stretched between them until it felt unbearable. Finally, Joseph broke the silence. "I need to know, Jennifer, what happened that day." Her hands trembled slightly, the coffee in her cup rippling. She took a shaky breath, her eyes fixed on the tabletop. When she spoke, her voice was soft, distant. "The accident. It was horrible. I remember getting on that bus. I remember the rain, the road slick and dangerous, and then..." She closed her eyes, her face contorting briefly with pain. Then there was screaming, glass shattering, metal twisting. Everything went black. Joseph's chest tightened, the memories of that fateful day crashing over him. The news reports, the funerals, the endless nights spent wondering how his world had fallen apart in an instant. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I woke up in a hospital. They told me I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. I didn't even know who I was." He stared at her, the pain in her words slicing through him. "You lost your memory?" She nodded. "For months, maybe longer. Everything was a blur. The doctors tried to help, but nothing stuck. They moved me to a recovery center in a small town called Green Valley. It was quiet there, far from everything. I was just another lost soul trying to piece a life together." Joseph swallowed hard. The thought of her alone, confused, struggling to remember who she was. It was almost too much to bear. He reached out, his fingers brushing the back of her hand. "Why didn't you come back when you remembered?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away. Tears welled in her eyes as she finally looked at him. "By the time my memories returned, everything had changed. My mother was gone. I read about you. You were married, successful. You had a new life. I didn't know where I fit anymore." He closed his eyes, regret and anguish twisting inside him. "Jennifer, my marriage was a mistake. I never stopped loving you. Not for a second." Her lip quivered. "I thought I was doing the right thing, staying away. I thought you'd moved on." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "I was just surviving. You were the one thing I couldn't replace. No matter how hard I tried." They sat in silence, the years of pain and missed chances hanging between them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice tentative. "There's more, Joseph. Something I need to tell you." He leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes shimmering with fear and anticipation. "While I was in Green Valley, before I remembered everything. I found out I was pregnant. The world seemed to tilt. Joseph's breath caught in his throat, his mind reeling. Pregnant, he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. His name is Blake. He's your son. Joseph. He works in your hotel, and he doesn't know who you are. The revelation crashed over him like a tidal wave, drowning him in shock, wonder, and a heartbreak he couldn't yet fathom. His mind struggled to catch up, but his heart knew one thing for certain. Everything had just changed. The cafe was quiet. The hum of conversation from other patrons, a distant murmur compared to the storm raging inside Joseph. He sat frozen, Jennifer's words echoing in his mind like a bell tolling some profound, life-altering truth. Blake is your son. The phrase ricocheted through his thoughts, making it difficult to focus on anything else. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes drifting to the window where city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. The weight of 25 lost years pressed down on his chest. Jennifer wiped at her cheeks, her eyes red from tears she'd fought to keep at bay. She looked at Joseph, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to tell you sooner, but every time I thought I could, something held me back. Fear, doubt, the feeling that maybe it was too late. Joseph took a deep breath, his jaw clenched as he tried to steady his swirling emotions. Too late, he repeated, his voice heavy. Jennifer, we lost so much time already. Time we can't get back. She looked away, her fingers twisting the edge of her sweater. I know. And Blake, he doesn't know. He thinks his father died before he was born. He's grown up without you, without knowing what really happened. Joseph felt a sharp pang of guilt. He thought of the young man he'd seen in the hotel, diligently working, unaware of the connection that tied them together. The thought of his son growing up without a father, of Jennifer facing those struggles alone, was almost unbearable. Does he know about me at all? Joseph asked, his voice barely holding steady. Jennifer shook her head slowly. No, I never told him your name. I didn't want him to grow up with false hope or bitterness, I thought I was protecting him. Joseph's fingers tightened around his coffee cup, the warmth seeping into his palms. You were protecting him, he murmured. But now he deserves to know the truth. We deserve that. Jennifer's eyes glistened with uncertainty. And if he doesn't want to know you, if he resents you for not being there, he swallowed hard, considering the possibility. It was a knife to his gut, the idea that his own son might reject him, but he couldn't let fear hold him back. Not anymore. That's a chance I have to take, he said firmly. I need to try. He has a right to know who I am, and I have a right to know him, no matter how hard it is. She nodded, her fingers trembling as she set her cup down. I understand. I don't want him to be hurt. He's a good kid. Joseph, kind, hardworking. He's everything I hoped he would be. A hint of pride flickered across her face, and Joseph's chest tightened. He wanted to know Blake, not just as an employee in his hotel, but as his son. The boy he should have raised, guided, and watched grow. I want to meet him. Jennifer, Joseph said, his eyes fixed on hers. Not as his boss, not as some stranger. I want to meet him as his father. Jennifer exhaled shakily, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. I need time to talk to him first. This can't come out of nowhere. He trusts me, and I owe it to him to prepare him for this. I understand, Joseph replied. Though every fiber of his being screamed for urgency, he had missed too much already. The need to reclaim what little time remained was overwhelming. A heavy silence settled between them, each lost in their thoughts. Joseph's gaze softened as he looked at Jennifer, the woman who had once been his everything, who was now a stranger in so many ways. But underneath the weight of years and secrets, he saw glimpses of the woman he had loved, the woman he still loved. Jennifer, he said, his voice softening. Why did you run from me today? She hesitated, guilt and fear flashing across her face. Because seeing you brought it all back. The pain, the love, the life I thought was gone forever. I didn't know how to face you, how to explain everything, and I didn't think you'd forgive me. His heart ached at her words. Forgive you, he whispered. You have nothing to apologize for. You did what you had to do to survive. The only thing I regret is that I couldn't find you sooner. Tears welled in her eyes again, and this time she didn't brush them away. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said, her voice breaking, "but maybe I was just scared." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. "We've both been scared," he admitted, "but we don't have to be anymore. We can fix this. Together." She looked at their hands, a small, fragile hope flickering in her eyes. "Do you really believe that?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I lost you once. I'm not going to lose you again." The cafe around them faded into a quiet blur. In that moment, they weren't two people with a tangled history. They were just Joseph and Jennifer, two souls trying to find their way back to each other. As they stood to leave, Joseph felt a sense of purpose anchoring him. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and potential heartbreak. But one thing was clear. This time, he wouldn't walk it alone. The walk back to the hotel was heavy with unspoken thoughts. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the streets bathed in the cool, silvery glow of twilight. Joseph walked beside Jennifer, their footsteps falling into an unconscious rhythm. The city noise buzzed around them, but it felt distant, like they were wrapped in a bubble of their own reality. Joseph stole glances at her, his mind a swirl of emotions. She looked the same, yet different, her eyes more guarded, her shoulders carrying an invisible weight. He wanted to say something, to fill the silence between them, but every word seemed too fragile, too inadequate. They reached the hotel lobby, the bright lights a sharp contrast to the fading day outside. Joseph paused, his hand resting lightly on Jennifer's arm. "Do you want to come up to my office? It'll be quiet there." She hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty before she nodded. "Okay." They walked side by side to the elevator, the mirrored walls reflecting back two people who seemed lost in their own thoughts. When the doors slid shut, an awkward tension filled the space. The soft hum of the elevator felt louder than it should. As the doors opened on the top floor, they stepped into the hallway leading to Joseph's office. He unlocked the door and held it open for her. The room was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the glittering Chicago skyline. The city stretched out beneath them, vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to the plush leather chairs in front of his desk. Jennifer sank into one, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Joseph took a seat across from her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. He searched her face, trying to read the emotions hidden behind her carefully constructed mask. "Are you sure you're ready to tell Blake?" he asked gently. Jennifer sighed, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I don't think I ever will be. This isn't the kind of thing you can prepare for." Joseph nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "You're right, but he deserves the truth, and so do we." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "I know. It's just, I've been his whole world for so long. I'm afraid this will shatter everything he believes." Joseph's heart ached for her. He could see the weight she carried, the years of sacrifice, of doing everything alone. He reached out, his hand covering hers. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. We can do this together." Her lip trembled, and she nodded, squeezing his hand in return. "Thank you." A knock on the door startled them both. Joseph straightened, clearing his throat. "Come in." The door opened, and a young man stepped in. Holding a clipboard, it was Blake. His dark hair was tousled, and he wore the standard black uniform of the hotel staff. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the room before landing on Jennifer. A smile broke across his face. "Hey, Mom. I didn't know you were still here," he said, his voice warm and genuine. Jennifer's face lit up in a way that made Joseph's heart twist. He saw the love, the connection that had been forged in his absence. He forced himself to stay composed, his mind racing with the knowledge that this was his son standing before him. "I was just finishing up," Jennifer said softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her eyes. "Blake, this is Mr. Foster. We were just talking." Blake turned to Joseph, his expression polite and professional. "Mr. Foster, sir. I hope everything is to your satisfaction." Joseph swallowed hard, his heart pounding. This was the moment he'd dreamed of, dreaded and longed for all at once. He forced a smile, the muscles in his face feeling strained. Everything's perfect, Blake. Thank you. Blake nodded, a hint of pride flickering in his eyes. Great. If you need anything else, just let me know. He turned to leave, but Jennifer's voice stopped him. Blake, wait. He paused, his brow furrowing as he looked back at her. What's wrong? Jennifer took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. There's something important I need to tell you. It's about your father. Blake's expression shifted to confusion. My father. What about him? She glanced at Joseph, her hand trembling slightly. Joseph met her gaze and nodded, silently offering his support. Blake, she said, her voice shaking. Your father didn't die before you were born. He's here. Blake's eyes widened, the confusion turning to disbelief. He looked from his mother to Joseph, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that wouldn't come. What? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Jennifer's tears finally spilled over. Joseph, Mr. Foster, he's your father. The room fell into a heavy silence. Blake stared at Joseph, shock and betrayal flickering across his face. Joseph's heart felt like it might shatter. You're lying, Blake said, his voice trembling. This can't be real. Joseph took a step forward, his voice soft and pleading. Blake, I know this is a lot, but it's the truth. I didn't know about you until today. I swear. Blake took a shaky step back, his eyes glistening with anger and hurt. I need to go. He turned and bolted from the room, the door slamming shut behind him. The sound echoed in Joseph's chest like a gunshot. Jennifer covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. Joseph stood there, the weight of silence settling over him, heavier than ever before. The slam of the door left a resounding echo in Joseph's mind, each reverberation a painful reminder of the walls that had just risen between him and his son. He stood there, the weight of his failure settling over him like a suffocating blanket. Jennifer's muffled sobs broke through his stupor, pulling him back to the room. He turned to her, his voice gentle but strained. Jennifer. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hands, trying to regain her composure. I knew this would happen. I knew it was too much. Too fast. Her voice cracked, raw with guilt. I should have told him differently, or waited longer. Joseph shook his head, his jaw tight. No, we did the right thing. He had to know the truth. Keeping this from him any longer would have only made things worse. Jennifer let out a shaky breath, her fingers trembling. He's hurt, confused. I don't know if he'll ever forgive us. Joseph felt the sting of those words. He could see Blake's face in his mind. The confusion, the anger, the betrayal, and behind all that, a deep pain that Joseph knew he had contributed to, even if unintentionally. He just needs time, Joseph said, trying to reassure both Jennifer and himself. This is a lot for him to process, but he's your son, Jennifer. He's strong. He'll come around. Jennifer nodded weakly, but the uncertainty in her eyes told him she wasn't convinced. She stood up, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. I need to find him, she said. I can't let him go through this alone. I'll come with you, Joseph offered, stepping forward. She hesitated, looking torn. I think it might be better if I talk to him first. He needs space, and seeing you might only make it worse right now. Joseph's chest tightened, the thought of being shut out gnawing at him, but he knew she was right. Blake was still grappling with the revelation, and pushing too hard could drive him further away. Okay, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. But let me know how he's doing, please. Jennifer touched his arm briefly, a gesture of reassurance. I will. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back at him, her eyes filled with a sorrow he wished he could erase. Then she slipped out, leaving Joseph alone in the silent room. He sank into the chair, his head in his hands. The weight of the past 25 years bore down on him. Regret, guilt, and longing twisted together in a tangled knot that threatened to choke him. He had finally found Jennifer, had discovered a son he never knew existed, and in a single moment, it felt like everything was slipping away again. I can't let it end like this. The thought gave him a spark of resolve. He wouldn't give up. He had lost too much already. Blake was his son, and even if it took every ounce of patience and effort, he would find a way to build a relationship with him. Meanwhile, Jennifer hurried through the hotel corridors, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew Blake well enough to know where he might go when he needed to think, or escape. As she reached the service exit, she pushed open the door and stepped into the cool night air. The alley behind the hotel was dimly lit, and the quiet of the city night felt strangely oppressive. She spotted Blake sitting on the low wall near the loading dock, his head bowed, his hands clenched into fists. Her heart clenched at the sight of him. He looked so vulnerable, so lost. "Blake," she said softly, approaching him cautiously. He didn't look up. "Why, Mom?" His voice was tight, restrained, but she could hear the pain bubbling beneath the surface. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Jennifer's eyes welled with tears. "I thought I was protecting you. I was scared, and I didn't know how to explain everything." He finally lifted his head, his eyes red and glistening. "You let me believe my dad was dead, that he didn't care enough to be in my life. I didn't want you to feel abandoned," she whispered. "I didn't know if he'd ever come back into our lives. And I thought it was better for you to not wonder what could have been." Blake shook his head, frustration etched across his face. "I had a right to know. I spent my whole life wondering why I didn't have a dad. And now, it turns out he's been right here. And I didn't even know." Jennifer reached for his hand, and to her relief, he didn't pull away. "I know I made mistakes," she said, her voice breaking. "But everything I did because I love you. I was trying to do the best I could." Blake's jaw clenched, his eyes filled with turmoil. "And him?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Does he care?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "He didn't know about you, Blake. But now that he does, he wants to be a part of your life. He's not perfect, but he wants to try." Blake looked away, his shoulders tense. "I don't know if I can forgive either of you. Not yet." Jennifer nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's okay. Just know that we love you. And when you're ready, we'll be here." A long silence stretched between them, before Blake finally whispered, "I just need time." Jennifer squeezed his hand gently. "Take all the time you need." She sat beside him in the quiet night, the weight of silence settling between them. But this silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the possibility of healing, of hope, and of a future they would have to build one fragile step at a time. Joseph spent the night in his office, the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows. The leather chair that usually provided him with comfort now felt stiff and unyielding. He leaned back, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, a dull ache behind them from hours of sleepless contemplation. Blake's reaction haunted him, the raw pain on his son's face, the disbelief and anger. It replayed in his mind like a broken record. He longed to fix it, to undo the years of separation and silence. But the truth weighed heavily on him. Time was a cruel teacher, and making up for lost years wasn't something he could do overnight. As dawn's first light filtered through the window, Joseph stood and stretched. His muscles were tight, his body weary, but his determination hadn't wavered. He poured himself a cup of coffee from the machine in the corner of his office, the bitter aroma filling the air. The warmth of the mug offered a small measure of comfort. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His heart jumped, a flicker of hope surging through him. "Come in," he said, his voice steady despite the anticipation. The door creaked open, and Jennifer stepped in. Looking as exhausted as he felt, her eyes were red, her hair slightly disheveled, but there was a calm resolve in her expression. She offered a faint smile as she closed the door behind her. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied, setting his coffee down. "Did you talk to him?" She nodded, taking a seat in the chair opposite his desk. "We talked, or at least I talked. He listened. Some of the time." Joseph sighed, sinking back into his chair. "How is he?" Jennifer's fingers traced the seam of her jeans. Hurt, confused, but he's thinking things through. He said he needs time. Joseph rubbed his hands over his face, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "I want to give him time. I do. But every second feels like another missed opportunity. I don't want to lose any more of his life." "I know," Jennifer said, her voice thick with emotion. "But pushing too hard could drive him further away. We have to let him come to us." He nodded. Though the words felt like a bitter pill to swallow, he had spent his life making things happen, never waiting for fate to decide. But this wasn't a business deal or a hotel opening. This was his son, flesh and blood. And the rules were different. Did he say anything about me? Joseph asked hesitantly, his gaze fixed on the coffee cup. Jennifer hesitated. He's angry, Joseph. He feels betrayed, and he doesn't know how to process everything yet. But there's something else there too. Curiosity. He wants to understand. Joseph's heart lifted slightly. Curiosity was better than complete rejection. It meant there was a chance, however small, to bridge the gap between them. I want to try, Joseph said quietly. I want him to know that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, even if he hates me right now. I'll wait. Jennifer smiled, a hint of warmth returning to her eyes. Then that's what we'll do. We'll give him the time and space he needs. But we won't give up. A comfortable silence settled between them. For a moment, it felt like old times. A shared understanding, a mutual resolve to face whatever came their way together. The years that had separated them seemed to thin, if only for an instant. Jennifer glanced at her watch. I need to get back to work. Blake's taking the afternoon shift today. Maybe you can talk to him then. Just keep it light, no pressure. Joseph nodded, his stomach tightening at the thought. I'll try. She stood, and he followed suit, walking her to the door. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, and looked up at him. We'll get through this, Joseph. He reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I believe that, because I'm not giving up on us either. A tear slid down her cheek, and she smiled through it. Then she turned and slipped out the door, leaving Joseph standing there with renewed purpose. The afternoon sun poured through the large windows of the hotel lobby. Joseph paced near the entrance, his nerves fraying with each passing minute. He felt like a teenager again, waiting to ask someone to prom, not a man who had built an empire. The weight of what he was about to do made him feel vulnerable in a way he hadn't felt in decades. Finally, he saw Blake across the lobby, his dark hair catching the light, his posture stiff with focus as he spoke with a guest. Joseph took a deep breath and forced his feet to move. Blake finished his conversation and turned, his eyes meeting Joseph's. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy, charged with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Hey, Joseph said, his voice softer than he intended. Hey, Blake replied, his tone cautious. Joseph swallowed, searching for the right words. I was wondering if you'd like to grab a coffee. No pressure, just a conversation. Blake hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Joseph. Finally, he shrugged. Yeah, okay. I guess we can do that. Relief flooded through Joseph, though he kept his expression neutral. Great, there's a place down the street, my treat. Blake nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. Let's go. They walked side by side, the silence between them thick but not unbearable. For Joseph, every step felt like a tentative bridge over a chasm he desperately wanted to cross. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The cafe was modest, nestled between a bookstore and a florist. With a chalkboard sign out front advertising the day's specials, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods wafted through the air as Joseph and Blake stepped inside. A soft bell chimed over the door, and Joseph's stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. They took a booth near the window. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the glass, casting a warm glow on the wooden table between them. Blake slid into the seat across from Joseph, his posture rigid, his eyes darting to the street outside as if searching for an escape route. Joseph swallowed the lump in his throat and forced a smile. What would you like, my treat, remember? Blake shrugged, not quite meeting his eyes. Just a black coffee. Joseph nodded and stood to place the order at the counter. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, his fingers drumming lightly on the edge of the counter as he waited for the drinks. When he returned to the booth, he set Blake's cup in front of him and eased into his own seat, the heat from his coffee warming his palms. Thanks, Blake muttered, staring into the dark liquid as if it held answers to the questions swirling in his mind. Joseph took a sip of his coffee, trying to steady his nerves. Blake, I know this is a lot, and I'm not here to force anything on you. I want us to talk. No expectations, just two people trying to understand each other. Blake's jaw tightened, and he nodded slowly. Okay, talk. Joseph exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment. He searched Blake's face, noting the strong jawline, the determined set of his mouth, and the eyes that mirrored his own. The resemblance was undeniable, and it struck Joseph again, just how much time they had lost. "I didn't know about you," Joseph said, his voice low. "I didn't know Jennifer survived the accident. I thought I lost her forever. And when I found out about you, it was like a part of me I didn't know was missing suddenly came back." Blake's eyes flicked up to meet his, guarded but curious. "And what? You just expect us to pick up where we left off?" Joseph shook his head. "No, I don't expect that. I know trust doesn't come that easily, but I want to be here now for you, if you'll let me." Blake leaned back in his seat, his arms crossed over his chest. The walls he had built were sturdy, but cracks were beginning to show. "Why did it take you this long to find us?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "You're a powerful man. You own a whole hotel empire. Didn't you look for her?" Joseph's shoulders sagged, the guilt weighing him down. "I did. After the accident, I searched everywhere. The authorities told me there were no survivors. I had no reason to believe otherwise. Eventually, I had to accept what they said, even if it never felt right." Blake's fingers drummed on the table. "And now that you know, what happens next? You want to play dad all of a sudden?" Joseph winced at the bitterness in his tone. "I want to get to know you, Blake. I don't want to replace what you've built with your mom. I just want to be a part of your life, however you'll let me." The silence that followed was heavy. Joseph's heart pounded, each second stretching out unbearably. Blake's eyes were fixed on the table, his brow furrowed as if wrestling with his thoughts. Finally, Blake let out a sigh. "You know, growing up, I always wondered what it would be like to have a dad. Someone to teach me things, to show up at my games, to just be there." He paused, his voice wavering. "I used to make up stories about who he was, what he looked like, why he wasn't around." Joseph's throat tightened. "I wish I could have been there for all of that, more than anything." Blake nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "Yeah, me too." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hum of conversation from the other patrons and the clinking of coffee cups. Joseph's heart ached for the boy Blake had been, the child who had yearned for a father who never came. He couldn't change the past, but he desperately wanted to shape the future. "Maybe," Blake said, his voice hesitant, "we can start with something simple. Get to know each other. No pressure." A spark of hope ignited in Joseph's chest. He nodded, his voice thick. "I'd like that. Whatever pace you're comfortable with." Blake managed a small, tentative smile. "Okay." It was a fragile bridge, but it was a bridge nonetheless. Joseph knew they were standing on shaky ground, but the fact that Blake was willing to try meant more to him than words could express. As they finished their coffee, the silence between them felt different now, no longer heavy with dread, but filled with possibility. They walked out of the cafe together, the sun setting behind the skyscrapers, casting long shadows on the pavement. Joseph glanced at Blake, who was staring straight ahead, his expression thoughtful. He didn't reach out, didn't push for more. For now, it was enough to walk side by side. It was just a beginning, but beginnings held hope. And for Joseph, hope was something he hadn't felt in a very long time. The walk back to the hotel was quiet, the air between Joseph and Blake filled with a delicate tension. Joseph didn't push for conversation, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of unraveling the fragile understanding they had just begun to build. Each step felt like a cautious dance between hope and uncertainty. Blake shoved his hands into his pockets, his gaze fixed on the sidewalk ahead. His brow was furrowed, the weight of unspoken thoughts pressing on him. Joseph's heart ached to know what was going through his son's mind, but he held back, respecting the space Blake seemed to need. As they neared the entrance of the Foster Grand Hotel, Blake hesitated, his steps slowing. He turned to Joseph, his eyes flickering with a mixture of hesitation and resolve. "Can we go somewhere to talk?" Blake asked, his voice soft, almost reluctant. Joseph's heart leapt, a surge of hope breaking through his careful restraint. "Of course, we can go up to my office or..." Blake shook his head. "Not there, somewhere. Less formal." Joseph paused, considering. "There's a rooftop garden on the top floor. It's quiet, and the view is nice." Blake nodded. "Okay, let's go there." They entered the hotel, and the elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than it should have. Joseph stole glances at Blake, searching for any sign of how he was feeling, but Blake's face was guarded. his thoughts hidden behind a mask Joseph couldn't quite read. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the rooftop garden. The sky was a canvas of deep oranges and purples, the sun dipping below the horizon. The city lights twinkled below them, a breathtaking view that seemed at odds with the turmoil in Joseph's heart. Blake stepped out, his eyes scanning the garden. The space was filled with lush greenery, small winding paths, and benches tucked away in quiet corners. Joseph led them to a bench near the edge, where they could see the skyline stretching into the distance. They sat side by side, the silence between them stretching out, heavy but not suffocating. Joseph took a deep breath, the cool evening air filling his lungs. "Blake, I know this is hard," he said, his voice low. "I can't imagine what you're feeling right now, but I want you to know that I'm here. Whatever you need, whatever you want to ask, I'm here." Blake stared out at the skyline, his jaw tight. "It's like everything I thought I knew about my life has been flipped upside down," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I spent years believing my dad was just gone, that he never wanted to be part of my life." Joseph's chest tightened. "I wish I could change that. I wish I had known. I would have done anything to be there for you." Blake's eyes narrowed, a spark of anger flashing through them. "But you didn't know, and I didn't know you, and now I don't know what to do with this. With you." Joseph swallowed hard, the pain in Blake's voice cutting deep. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance between them, but he knew that trust couldn't be forced. "I get it," Joseph said softly. "You don't have to decide anything right now. We can take it slow." Blake shook his head, his voice trembling. "I don't even know if I want to take it slow. Part of me wants to get to know you, but another part of me feels like it's betraying everything I believed growing up. Like if I let you in, it means everything Mom and I went through didn't matter." Joseph's heart clenched. "Blake, your mom is incredible. Everything she did for you, everything you went through together, that matters. Nothing will ever change that. Getting to know me doesn't erase that." Blake's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "It just feels so complicated. I don't know if I'm ready for this." Joseph nodded, his voice gentle. "It's okay to feel that way. There's no right or wrong here. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it." Blake let out a shaky breath, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I just wish things were simpler." Joseph's throat tightened. "So do I." They sat in silence, the wind rustling through the leaves. Joseph's heart ached with the desire to fix everything, to make the pain disappear. But he knew this wasn't a problem he could solve with money or power. This was about patience, understanding, and the slow, difficult work of rebuilding trust. Blake finally turned to him, his voice hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," Joseph said. "Why did you never get married again, after you thought Mom was gone?" Joseph's eyes softened. "Because I never stopped loving her, and part of me always felt like I was waiting for something, or someone. Maybe deep down, I was waiting for you too." Blake's eyes searched his, the wall between them cracking just a little. He nodded, his lips pressing together. "Okay." It wasn't an answer, or a resolution, but it was a beginning. They sat there as the city lights twinkled beneath them, two men trying to navigate the fragile path of a relationship just beginning to form. For now, that was enough. The rooftop garden gradually fell into darkness, the last remnants of twilight fading behind the horizon. The city lights glimmered below, a million stories playing out beneath the vast Chicago skyline. Joseph sat beside Blake, the silence between them more comfortable now. Though the weight of the unspoken still hung in the air, Blake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, staring at the distant glow of headlights weaving through the streets below. The breeze ruffled his hair, and for a moment, he looked younger, vulnerable. Joseph's heart ached at the realization of how much he had missed. Blake's childhood, his milestones, his struggles, moments that should have been shared. Blake finally broke the silence, his voice low and tentative. "It's weird, you know, sitting here with you. You're supposed to be a stranger, but you're not." Joseph nodded, his gaze fixed on the skyline. "I feel the same way. I'm trying to figure out how to fit into your life without making things harder for you." Blake turned to look at him, his eyes sharp and searching. "Why do you even care so much? You didn't know I existed until a few days ago." Joseph took a deep breath, his fingers interlocking as he rested his hands on his knees. Because the moment I found out, everything changed. I don't know how to explain it, but knowing you're my son, it's like a part of me woke up. A part I didn't know was missing. Blake's eyes narrowed slightly, his jaw clenching. But you've been fine without me. You built your empire, lived your life. You didn't need me. Joseph flinched at the bitterness in his son's voice, each word landing like a blow. You're right, I built a successful life, but it always felt empty. I didn't understand why. Until now, I thought I was mourning Jennifer, and I was. But it was more than that. There was a void I couldn't fill, and now I know that void was you. Blake's eyes shimmered with a mixture of anger and hurt. It's hard to believe that I spent my whole life without a father. Now you show up and say you want to be one. It feels unfair. Joseph's throat tightened, and he nodded slowly. It is unfair. I won't pretend it's not. You didn't deserve to grow up with that emptiness, and I didn't deserve to miss out on being your dad. But here we are, and all I can do is try to make things right. Blake's gaze dropped to the ground, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the stone bench. I don't even know what having a dad is supposed to feel like. Joseph's chest ached at the confession. He had no quick fix for that, no blueprint to follow. All he had was his own desire to be there, to show up in whatever way Blake would let him. We can figure it out together, Joseph said gently. There's no rush, no expectations. I just want to be in your life, however you'll let me. Blake nodded, but his expression was still conflicted. And what if I can't forgive you? What if I'm too angry to let you in? Joseph swallowed the lump in his throat, his voice low and steady. Then I'll wait. I'll keep showing up until you're ready. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I just hope you'll give me a chance. The wind picked up, rustling through the leaves, the sound filling the pause between them. Blake took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling as he wrestled with his thoughts. I don't know if I can promise anything right now, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to, Joseph replied. Just knowing you're willing to try is enough. Blake stood up abruptly, shoving his hands into his pockets. I should go. Mom's probably waiting for me. Joseph nodded, standing with him. I understand. They walked back to the elevator in silence, the soft hum of the city below a constant backdrop. As the elevator doors slid open, Blake stepped inside and turned to face Joseph. I'll think about it, Blake said, his eyes meeting Joseph's. About us. A small, tentative smile touched Joseph's lips. That's all I ask. The doors slid shut, and Joseph was left alone in the dim glow of the rooftop lights. He exhaled slowly, his heart heavy but hopeful. Progress was slow, but there was progress nonetheless. For now, that was enough to keep him going, back in his office. The city stretched out before him, a blanket of lights that seemed endless. He poured himself a glass of water, the coldness grounding him. His thoughts wandered to Jennifer, to Blake, and to the fragile hope he was clinging to. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in, he said, expecting an assistant or a hotel manager, but when the door opened, it was Jennifer. Her eyes searched his face, worry etched into her features. How did it go? Joseph sighed, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped. She nodded, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. That sounds about right. He leaned against his desk, his gaze fixed on her. He said he'd think about it. That's a good sign, she said softly, moving closer. I just want him to know I'm not going anywhere, Joseph murmured. No matter how long it takes. Jennifer's eyes filled with warmth, and she reached for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. We'll get there, together. He closed his fingers around hers, the connection steadying him. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't alone. The days that followed were a strange mix of hope and tension. Joseph threw himself into his work, trying to maintain the facade of a man in control. Meetings, inspections, calls, all blurred together, a distraction he desperately needed. But beneath the surface, his thoughts churned restlessly, always circling back to Blake. Every time he passed through the hotel lobby, his eyes instinctively searched for his son. Sometimes he spotted Blake from a distance, focused on his tasks, his posture rigid and his expression unreadable. Joseph wanted to approach him, to say something, but he held back. Blake had asked for time, and Joseph was determined to respect that. One late afternoon, as Joseph was reviewing reports in his office, his phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at the screen and his breath caught. Blake, hey, are you free to talk? His fingers trembled as he typed back. Joseph, yes. Where would you like to meet? The reply came quickly. Blake, the rooftop garden. In 15 minutes. Joseph's heart pounded, a mix of excitement and anxiety flooding through him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Don't mess this up, he told himself. This was a fragile step, and he needed to tread carefully. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor passing with agonizing slowness. When the doors finally opened, he stepped onto the rooftop. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the garden. The breeze carried the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass, a soothing contrast to the storm of emotions inside him. Blake was already there, standing near the edge, his hands resting on the railing as he looked out over the city. The skyline stretched before him, a canvas of lights and shadows. Joseph approached quietly, not wanting to startle him. Hey, he said softly. Blake turned, his expression guarded but not hostile. Hey. Joseph stuffed his hands into his pockets, resisting the urge to reach out. Thanks for meeting me. Blake shrugged, his eyes flicking back to the horizon. I figured we should try. See if this gets any easier. Joseph nodded, a small smile touching his lips. I'd like that. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind brushing past them, carrying away the tension just a little. Joseph searched for the right words, something that wouldn't feel forced or insincere. How have you been? He asked finally. Blake let out a slow breath, confused, angry, but also curious. It's weird. Joseph's chest tightened. I get that. I feel the same way. There's so much I want to know about you, but I don't want to push. Blake's eyes narrowed slightly. Why do you care so much now? You didn't know I existed, and you seemed fine without me. What changed? Joseph swallowed hard. He knew this was a fair question, one that deserved an honest answer. I wasn't fine, Blake. I told myself I was, but looking back, there was always something missing. When I found out about you, it was like a light switched on. Suddenly, everything made sense. The emptiness, the restless feeling. It was because a part of me was out there, and I didn't even know it. Blake looked down, his fingers tightening on the railing. It feels like I'm supposed to just accept this, like everything's okay now. Joseph's heart ached. I don't expect everything to be okay. I know this is going to take time, and if you decide you don't want me in your life, I'll respect that. But I want to try, Blake. I want to get to know you, and I want you to know me. Blake was silent for a moment, his shoulders tense. I don't know what having a dad is supposed to feel like. I've never needed one before. Joseph nodded slowly. I can't make up for the years we lost, but maybe we can figure it out together. No expectations, no pressure, just see where it goes. Blake's eyes met his, searching for sincerity. And if it doesn't work, Joseph's voice was steady, then at least we tried. But I hope it does because I want to be here for you, whatever that looks like. Blake's gaze softened just a fraction. He took a deep breath, as if trying to decide whether to let Joseph in or push him away again. Finally, he nodded. Okay, we can try. Relief washed over Joseph, so powerful he had to steady himself. He forced himself to keep his reaction contained, not wanting to overwhelm Blake. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. That means a lot to me. They stood together, the silence no longer as strained. The wind whispered around them, carrying away some of the fear and doubt. For the first time, the distance between them felt just a little smaller. Blake shifted, glancing at Joseph. There's a coffee shop I like near the lakefront. Maybe we could go there sometime. Just hang out. Joseph smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. I'd love that. Blake's lips twitched into a faint smile. Okay, I'll let you know when. Joseph nodded, a sense of cautious hope settling over him. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. And for now, a start was enough. They turned back to the view, the city lights flickering like a million tiny promises. For the first time in a long time, Joseph felt like those promises might just come true. Joseph's heart felt lighter as he left the rooftop garden. The brief conversation with Blake was a fragile bridge, but it was something. It was a first step, and he clung to that hope. For so long, he had been consumed by the fear of losing everything he loved. Now, for the first time in years, he felt the faint glow of possibility. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt different. The weight on his shoulders didn't seem as crushing. He stepped out, the polished floors gleaming under the bright lights. Guests bustled through the lobby, the usual hum of hotel life a comforting constant. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his heart skipping a beat when he saw Jennifer's name on the screen. Jennifer. How did it go? He smiled softly, his thumbs tapping a quick reply. Joseph. Better than I expected. He wants to try. We're getting coffee soon. A moment later, the reply came. Jennifer, I'm so glad he needs this, you both do. He tucked the phone back into his pocket, her words echoing in his mind. She was right. They both needed this chance. It was a fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. The next morning, the sun streamed through Joseph's office windows, casting long shadows across the floor. He was poring over a series of reports when a knock on the door interrupted his concentration. Come in, he called, his voice steady. The door opened slowly, and Blake stepped inside, hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans. Joseph's heart leapt, but he kept his expression calm, not wanting to spook his son. Hey, Blake said, his voice low. Hey, Joseph replied, standing up and gesturing to a chair. Come on in. Blake hesitated for a moment before sitting down. He glanced around the office, his eyes taking in the sleek furniture, the expansive windows, the framed awards on the walls. Joseph wondered what Blake saw. A successful businessman, a stranger, or maybe, just maybe, a father trying to make things right. Nice office, Blake muttered. Thanks, Joseph smiled. I've spent more time here than I probably should. Blake's lips quirked into a faint smile. Figures. They sat in silence for a moment, the awkwardness settling between them. Joseph cleared his throat. I'm glad you came by. I wasn't sure if you'd want to. Blake shrugged. I figured I should give this a shot, the coffee thing, if you're still up for it. Joseph's smile widened. Absolutely. There's a place a few blocks from here, unless you have another spot in mind. No, that's fine, Blake said, his eyes flicking to the floor. I don't know how this is supposed to go. Joseph's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. There's no right or wrong way. We'll just talk about anything you want, or nothing if that's easier. Blake nodded, his fingers tapping against his knee. Okay, let's do it. They left the office together, walking side by side through the lobby. Joseph fought the urge to fill the silence with meaningless chatter. He didn't want to push, didn't want to break the tentative trust they were building. The cafe was a cozy spot with exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and the comforting aroma of coffee and pastries. They found a small table near the window, the morning light spilling across the worn wood. What do you want? Joseph asked, pulling out his wallet. Just a coffee, Blake said. Black. Got it? Joseph went to the counter, his mind buzzing with 1,000 thoughts. He ordered the drinks, taking a deep breath as he waited. Don't mess this up, he reminded himself. He returned to the table, setting Blake's coffee in front of him. Here you go. Thanks, Blake muttered, wrapping his hands around the cup. They sat in silence for a moment, the steam from their cups curling between them. Joseph took a sip, the bitter warmth grounding him. So, Blake said, his eyes fixed on the table. What was it like building all this? He gestured vaguely toward the direction of the hotel. Joseph's eyebrows rose slightly. Hard, exciting, lonely sometimes. Blake glanced up. Lonely, Joseph nodded. Success doesn't mean much if you don't have someone to share it with. I poured everything into my work, but there were always moments when I wondered if it was worth it. Blake's gaze softened slightly. Did you ever think about having a family after you thought Mom was gone? Joseph swallowed, the memories bitter and sharp. I tried to move on, but I couldn't. I loved your mom. I never stopped. And a part of me always felt like something was missing. Blake nodded, his eyes distant. I guess I get that. Mom was always enough for me. But sometimes I wondered what it would be like to have someone else there. Joseph's chest tightened. I wish I could have been there for you, Blake, for her. Too. They sat in silence, the weight of lost years pressing down on them. But beneath that weight was something else. A fragile understanding, a shared pain that connected them. Blake took a deep breath. I don't know if this is going to work, but I want to try. I think Mom wants that too. Joseph's throat tightened, a wave of emotion threatening to break through. That's all I want, for us to try. Blake nodded, a small tentative smile flickering across his face. Okay, it was just a word, but it carried the promise of something more. Joseph felt hope bloom in his chest, fragile but real, for the first time. It felt like the future was theirs to shape. The cafe's soft hum of conversation buzzed in the background as Joseph and Blake finished their coffees. The silence between them was no longer suffocating. It felt tentative, like a bridge carefully being built with each exchanged word and shared glance. Joseph watched his son with a quiet sense of awe. Blake's guarded demeanor was still there, but cracks were starting to show. There was curiosity in his eyes, a cautious willingness to engage. Joseph clung to that sliver of hope like a lifeline. As Blake leaned back in his chair, he drummed his fingers lightly on the table. So what happens now? Joseph took a deep breath, considering his words carefully. That depends on you. I'm here, and I want to be a part of your life, but I don't want to rush you or overwhelm you. We can take this as slow as you need. Blake nodded, his gaze fixed on the chipped edge of his coffee cup. I guess we just keep talking, maybe do some stuff together. A smile tugged at the corners of Joseph's lips. I'd like that. What kind of stuff do you like to do? Blake hesitated, his eyes flicking up to meet Joseph's. I'm into basketball. I play pickup games sometimes at the park near our place. Joseph's heart lifted. I used to play in college, not very well, but I loved it. Blake's mouth twitched into a faint smile. Maybe you can come watch sometime, or play, if you're up for it. Joseph chuckled, warmth spreading through his chest. I might be rusty, but I'd love to give it a shot. Blake nodded, a hint of something softer in his eyes. Okay, maybe this weekend. Joseph's smile widened. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a step. A real, tangible step toward the relationship he so desperately wanted to build. They left the cafe, the sun now higher in the sky, warming the chilly morning air. As they walked back to the hotel, Joseph couldn't help but notice how the silence between them felt lighter. For once, the space wasn't filled with dread or uncertainty, but with the potential for something new. When they reached the hotel entrance, Blake paused, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I should get back to work. Mom's probably wondering where I am. Joseph nodded, his voice gentle. Tell her I said hi. Blake gave a small nod. Yeah, I will. Joseph watched him go, his heart swelling with pride and relief. Blake had given him a chance, and that was more than he had dared to hope for. As he turned to head back to his office, he felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out, smiling when he saw Jennifer's name. Jennifer, how did it go, Joseph? He invited me to watch him play basketball this weekend. We're taking things slow, but it's a start. A moment later, her reply came. Jennifer, I'm so happy to hear that. He needs this. And so do you. Joseph's fingers hovered over the screen. He hesitated for a moment, then typed out a reply. Joseph, maybe we could all go out for dinner afterward. The three of us. Her response took a little longer this time. His heart pounded, second-guessing himself. Finally, the message popped up. Jennifer, I think that sounds perfect. Relief washed over him, and for the first time in years, Joseph felt like he was on the path to something real, something worth fighting for. The weekend arrived faster than Joseph expected. He stood at the edge of the basketball court, dressed in jeans and a casual sweater, feeling a little out of place among the teenagers and young adults warming up on the asphalt. Jennifer stood beside him, her smile gentle and reassuring. Blake jogged onto the court, a basketball tucked under his arm. He glanced over at them, his eyes catching Joseph's. There was a flicker of something Joseph couldn't quite name. Maybe acceptance, maybe just acknowledgement, but it was enough. Jennifer leaned in close, her voice soft. He's glad you're here, even if he won't say it yet. Joseph nodded, his throat tight. I'm glad to be here. The game started, and Joseph watched with pride as Blake dribbled down the court, weaving between players with a natural grace. He was good, confident, quick on his feet, his movements fluid. Joseph's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and sadness. He had missed so much of Blake's life, but maybe he wouldn't have to miss any more. After the game, Blake wiped the sweat from his brow and walked over, his breathing heavy but a smile on his face. "You weren't kidding about being rusty," he said, glancing at Joseph's clothes. Joseph laughed. "I thought I'd spare myself the embarrassment this time. Next time, though, I'm bringing my sneakers." Blake smirked. "We'll see if you can keep up." Jennifer laughed, the sound light and genuine. "I'd pay to see that." Joseph looked between the two of them, his heart full in a way it hadn't been for years. "How about that dinner we talked about?" Blake nodded, his smile lingering. "Yeah, that sounds good." They walked to a nearby diner, the kind with cracked leather booths and a jukebox in the corner. The conversation flowed easily. Stories about Blake's childhood, jokes and shared memories that were slowly being built. For the first time, Joseph felt like they weren't just individuals struggling to find their way. They were a family, redefining themselves, one moment at a time. And for Joseph, that was everything. The soft murmur of conversation and the clinking of cutlery filled the diner. But for Joseph, the world had narrowed to the two people sitting across from him. Blake was slouched in the booth, his hair still damp from the basketball game, his eyes flicking between his mother and Joseph. Jennifer, seated next to Blake, wore a soft smile, her eyes warm but cautious. Joseph stirred his coffee, more out of habit than need. The rhythmic motion steadied him as he soaked in the unfamiliar warmth of their presence. He had dreamed of moments like this for so long, and now that it was happening, he was terrified of saying the wrong thing, of shattering the fragile peace they had built. "So," Blake said, breaking the silence as he poked at a pile of fries on his plate. "What did you think of the game?" Joseph smiled, relief spreading through him at the normalcy of the question. "You were incredible, fast, confident. I can see you've put in a lot of work." Blake shrugged, but a hint of pride flashed in his eyes. "Yeah, I guess it's just something I like doing." Jennifer nodded, her voice soft. "He's been playing since he was little. We used to go to the courts on weekends, just the two of us." Joseph's chest tightened at the image, Jennifer cheering from the sidelines, Blake running up and down the court, the echo of a life he had missed. "I wish I'd been there to see that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Blake's fork paused midair. He didn't look up, but his voice was steady. "Yeah, me too." The weight of those 3 words settled between them, heavy but not unbearable. Joseph took a deep breath, willing himself to stay present, to not let the guilt drown him. "I know I can't change the past," Joseph said, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "But I'm here now, and if you'll let me, I want to be part of your life, for all the big things and the small things." Blake finally looked up, his gaze meeting Joseph's. The walls behind his eyes seemed a little lower, a little less fortified. "I'm still figuring out how to feel about all this, but I think I want that too." Joseph's heart leapt, but he kept his voice calm. "That's all I can ask for." Jennifer's hand brushed against Blake's on the table, a silent show of support. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said gently. "We're figuring it out together." Blake nodded, taking a sip of his soda. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, and for a moment, they were just a family sharing a meal, the fractures of the past slowly beginning to mend. After dinner, they walked out of the diner into the cool evening air. The city buzzed around them, headlights streaking by, distant laughter from a group of teenagers, the rhythmic whoosh of traffic. The world was alive, and for the first time in a long time, Joseph felt like he was part of it. Blake walked a few steps ahead, his hands shoved into his pockets, his head tilted toward the sky. Jennifer fell into step beside Joseph, her shoulder brushing his lightly. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "He needed this." Joseph glanced at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I needed it too." They walked in silence for a moment, their steps in sync. The streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk, and the night air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers from a nearby park. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" Jennifer asked suddenly, her voice tinged with melancholy. Joseph's heart tightened. "All the time. I think about what our life would have been like if the accident hadn't happened, if we'd gotten married, raised Blake together. It's hard not to imagine it." She nodded, her eyes distant. I used to dream about that life, but after a while, I had to let it go. He reached out, his fingers grazing her hand. Maybe we can't have that life, but we can have something new, different, but still good. Jennifer turned to him, her eyes searching his face. Do you really believe that? He nodded, his voice firm. I do. It's not too late for us, Jennifer. Not too late for a family. Her lips trembled slightly, and she gave a small, hesitant smile. I want to believe that. He squeezed her hand gently, the warmth of her skin grounding him. We'll figure it out, one step at a time. Blake turned around, his brow furrowing as he watched them. You two coming or what? Jennifer laughed, the sound light and genuine. Yeah, we're coming. They walked together, the distance between them closing with every step. Joseph felt a fragile hope blooming in his chest. Delicate, but resilient. The broken pieces of their past weren't fixed, but they were being carefully rearranged, forming something new, something worth holding on to. As they reached the hotel, Blake paused at the entrance. He turned to Joseph, his expression uncertain but open. Thanks for coming today. It meant a lot. Joseph's throat tightened, and he nodded. It meant a lot to me too. Blake gave a small smile and then disappeared inside. Jennifer lingered, her eyes meeting Joseph's. We're getting there, she whispered. He smiled, his heart full. Yeah, we are. And for the first time in a long time, Joseph believed it. The hotel lobby's warm glow welcomed them as they stepped inside, the hum of quiet conversation, the soft shuffle of luggage wheels, and the polished marble floors felt oddly grounding to Joseph. He watched Blake walk ahead, his posture relaxed in a way Joseph hadn't seen before. Each step felt like progress, like they were finally piecing together the jagged edges of a broken past. Jennifer walked beside Joseph, her presence a steadying force. He glanced at her, and she gave him a small smile that spoke of shared relief and cautious hope. They were making it work, slowly, but it was happening. The fragile bridge between him and his son wasn't just being built. It was holding as they reached the hallway leading to the staff quarters. Blake turned around. I'm going to head up early shift tomorrow, he said, his voice casual. Joseph nodded, his heart swelling. All right, good night, Blake. Good night, Dad. The words came out quickly, almost like he was testing them, seeing how they felt on his tongue. Joseph's breath caught. The word Dad hung in the air, heavier than anything he could have imagined. He felt a surge of emotion so powerful it almost buckled his knees, but he kept his expression calm, not wanting to overwhelm Blake. Good night, son, he replied, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. Blake nodded and disappeared down the corridor. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, Joseph let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His chest tightened, but it was a good kind of ache, the ache of hope finally realized. Jennifer touched his arm, her eyes shimmering. That was a big step. He nodded, his voice soft. It was. They stood in the quiet hallway, the weight of the moment settling over them. Joseph's eyes met Jennifer's, a mix of gratitude and longing passing between them. You helped make this possible, he whispered. I couldn't have done this without you. She smiled, her fingers brushing against his. You're doing it, Joseph. He's letting you in. That's because of you. He shook his head gently. No, it's because of us. You raised him to be strong and kind. He's giving me a chance because of who you taught him to be. Jennifer's eyes softened, and she looked away briefly, as if the emotion was too much to bear. I did the best I could, she murmured. But he needs you too. I see it now. Joseph's fingers found hers, his touch gentle but sure. We can do this together, for him, for us. She nodded, her gaze returning to his. I want that. A warmth spread through him, filling the cracks that years of loneliness had left behind. He squeezed her hand. Anchoring himself in the reality of this moment, the future was uncertain, but they were facing it together now. The next morning, Joseph found himself in the lobby earlier than usual. He stood by the front desk, pretending to review the day's schedule while his eyes scanned for Blake. The hotel bustled with early risers, tourists checking out, and staff starting their shifts. He spotted Blake near the entrance, adjusting his uniform tie as he chatted with another employee. Joseph watched for a moment, pride swelling in his chest. Blake was diligent, focused, and respected by his colleagues. It was clear he had inherited Jennifer's determination and strength. Blake noticed Joseph and gave a small nod. Joseph smiled and walked over, trying to keep his nerves at bay. "Morning," Joseph said, his voice light. "Morning," Blake replied, his expression guarded but not closed off. Joseph hesitated, then took a breath. "I was wondering if you wanted to grab lunch later." "No pressure." Blake's fingers tapped against his thigh, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered the offer. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, sure, that'd be okay." Relief washed over Joseph. "Great. There's a place nearby I think you'd like. Just let me know when you're free." "Will do," Blake said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. He glanced at his watch. "I gotta get to work. See you later." "See you," Joseph replied, watching him walk away with a mixture of pride and hope. When lunch rolled around, they met at a small deli a few blocks from the hotel. The place was bustling, filled with the scent of fresh bread and cured meats. They ordered sandwiches and found a table near the window. Blake took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "So, what do you do when you're not running hotels?" Joseph chuckled. "Honestly, I haven't figured that out yet. My life's been about work for so long, I'm still learning how to slow down." Blake smirked. "You should try basketball. Gets you out of your head." "I just might," Joseph said, smiling. "Maybe you can teach me a few things?" Blake shrugged, but the corners of his mouth lifted. "Maybe." They ate in comfortable silence, the gaps between their words no longer awkward. Joseph felt the bridge of trust growing stronger. Plank by plank. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. As they finished their meal, Joseph leaned back, a satisfied sigh escaping him. "This is nice." Blake nodded, his eyes meeting Joseph's. "Yeah, it is." Joseph's heart swelled. It was just lunch, just small talk, but it was a foundation, a chance to rebuild what had been lost, and he was ready to keep building, no matter how long it took. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm amber glow across the city. The faint breeze carried with it the scent of blooming flowers and distant car exhaust, a blend of nature and urban life. Joseph, Jennifer, and Blake walked side by side down a tree-lined path in Grant Park, the crunch of gravel underfoot a soft rhythm to their steps. Blake had suggested the walk after lunch, surprising both his parents with the gesture. Joseph took in the moment, not daring to break the spell. He glanced to his left, where Jennifer walked with easy grace, the wind catching strands of her hair. To his right, Blake's face was relaxed, his eyes reflecting a quiet peace Joseph had longed to see. This was what he'd been fighting for, moments like these, where hope replaced regret and possibility replaced fear. They reached a clearing where a bench faced the lakefront. The water sparkled under the waning sunlight, waves gently lapping against the shoreline. Blake stopped and turned to his parents. "I want to talk to you both," he said, his voice steady but serious. Joseph's heart tightened. He exchanged a glance with Jennifer, who nodded, her eyes mirroring his mix of anticipation and concern. They sat down on the bench, leaving space for Blake to join them if he chose. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood in front of them, his hands shoved into his pockets. "I've been thinking a lot," Blake began, his gaze shifting to the horizon. "About everything. About us." Joseph held his breath, his fingers gripping his knees. He could feel Jennifer's tension beside him, the air thick with unspoken emotion. "I was angry," Blake continued, his voice low. "For a long time I felt like I didn't need a dad, like having one would just mess things up. But when you showed up, everything I thought I knew got flipped upside down." He paused, his eyes finally meeting Joseph's. "I still don't have everything figured out. I probably won't for a while, but I don't want to push you away. I want to see where this goes. I want us to try." Joseph's chest constricted, his throat tight with emotion. He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I want that too." "Blake, more than anything." Blake looked down, scuffing his shoe against the gravel. "It's not going to be perfect. I'm still going to get mad sometimes, and I need time, but I think I want to know you." Joseph's vision blurred with tears. He refused to let fall. He stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. giving Blake space to retreat if he needed to. Instead, Blake stayed rooted, his eyes filled with vulnerability and courage. "I'm here," Joseph said softly, "for the long haul. Whatever you need, whatever pace you want, I'll be right here." Blake nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Good." Jennifer let out a shaky breath, her eyes glistening. She stood, reaching out to touch Blake's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Blake shrugged, trying to downplay the emotion, but his eyes softened. "Yeah, well, you kinda raised me that way." Jennifer laughed, the sound light and full of relief. "That I did." They stood in a quiet triangle, the weight of past hurts finally starting to lift. The sun sank lower, streaking the sky with hues of gold, pink, and lavender. It felt symbolic, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Joseph cleared his throat, his voice gentle. "How about dinner?" "My treat. Anywhere you want." Blake smirked. "You keep offering to pay. Is that a dad thing?" Joseph chuckled, the sound surprising even himself. "Maybe, or maybe it's just my way of making up for lost time." Blake's smile widened. "Genuine now." "All right. There's a pizza place downtown I like. Nothing fancy. Perfect," Joseph said, his heart soaring. They walked back toward the car, the silence filled with a newfound comfort. Joseph slid his arm around Jennifer's waist, and she leaned into him, her warmth a balm to his weary heart. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it. We did it." Joseph thought, this wasn't just his victory, it was theirs. A testament to patience, love, and the relentless hope that broken things could be made whole again. As they drove through the city, the lights of Chicago flickering to life, Joseph caught Blake's reflection in the rearview mirror. His son looked out the window, a small, contented smile on his face. For the first time in years, Joseph felt complete. The empty spaces in his heart were no longer voids to be filled with work or wealth. They were filled with love, with second chances, with the promise of a future where they didn't just survive, they thrived. They pulled up to the pizza place, laughter and the scent of freshly baked dough spilling out into the night. Joseph turned off the engine and looked at Blake. "Ready?" he asked. Blake nodded. "Yeah, let's go." They stepped into the warmth of the restaurant, the door closing behind them, shutting out the chill of the night. Inside, the glow was brighter, the air filled with the smell of comfort and the sound of joy. For Joseph, it wasn't just another meal. It was a celebration of healing, of forgiveness, of a family redefined. And as they took their seats, he knew this was only the beginning, a new beginning.